There is a lot of famous bad guy groups in anime. In fact, it's one of the most prevalent tropes all throughout anime. There's the Arankars in Bleach, the Admirals in One Piece, the Akatsuki in Naruto. But none of those groups match up to my favorite bad guy group in all of anime, the Phantom Troupe in Hunter x Hunter. The Phantom Troupe to me represents what a perfect bad guy group should look like. A group of rogue thieves from the bottom of the earth coming together to steal as much from the world as they possibly can. A team filled with people so powerful that the Zoldycks on it aren't even the strongest people. A team so powerful that they knew inter-team fighting would destroy it, so all decisions are made with a coin flip. But what if I told you you were thrown into the Hunter x Hunter verse? Let's say you got smashed by a truck coon. And once you've arrived in the Hunter x Hunter verse, you become a hunter. Not a hunter of insane regard like Netero or Gon or Killua. You become an average to slightly above average hunter. Think lowball Pokol, the bow and arrow hunter, and highball knuckle and shoot. Congratulations, you become a hunter, but there's one problem. You now have to kill the Phantom Troupe or they will kill you. Yes, that's right. Today, ladies and gentlemen, we are doing Surviving the Phantom Troupe. With a little bit of my help, I can help you find and exploit the weaknesses of every Phantom Troupe member so a fair to average hunter like you and me can make their way through soloing the Phantom Troupe. But before we get into soloing anybody, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And while we're clicking things, guys, if you could please follow my other two YouTube pages, NC Gamer 23, where instead of talking about anime, I play video games, and Hammer's Collection, where instead of talking about anime, I unbox things from it. But before we get into all that, guys, today we got to talk about a brand new sponsor to the page, Athletic Greens. Listen, we all know I like to stay in shape. Self-care is incredibly important to me, and a big part of my self-care routine is Athletic Greens. You see, Athletic Greens is a nutritional company focused on making self-care and nutrition a lot easier. You see, my favorite Athletic Greens product is AG1. You see, AG1 is a nutritional drink you drink 1 scoop of a day. You mix this 1 scoop in the provided bottle with a little bit of water, shake like your mama taught you, and drink. And it's that easy. But why drink AG1? Well, I could list off that it gives you an energy and immune system boost, brain function boost, gut health boost, but how about I tell you what it does for me? AG1 increases my energy and endurance. AG1 gives me nutrients and phytonutrients that help me support and sustain my high energy levels. And this helps me both in the gym and while recording content. AG1 achieves this by including key energy players that maintain energy levels, support adrenal health, and work together. Things like vitamin K2, vitamin B12, and beetroot powder keep my energies at an all-time high. On top of that, AG1 helps me with my brain health. Believe it or not, a lot of this job is thinking. AG1 includes a bunch of ingredients that are crucial in keeping high-performing athletes and high-performing content creators like myself in the zone. AG1 includes vital adaptogens that help you recover from burnout and stay focused. It does this by supporting your adrenal health and helping you recover from stressful situations. It achieves this with things like vitamin B6, magnesium, and green tea extract. So what are you guys waiting for? Get up to my level and get to drinking AG1. So what are you guys waiting for? Use the link in my pinned comment or my description to get a free year-long subscription to D3K2 and 5 travel packs for free with your first purchase, of course. But guys, you can't put a price on your own health, mental or physical. So, the Phantom Troupe, the criminal organization of the underworld, all adorned with individual spider tattoos. A revolving cast of thieves that replace any dead member almost instantaneously with someone just as powerful, if not more powerful. All led by the enigmatic and charismatic leader, Crollo. The Phantom Troupe has murdered thousands of people. They were responsible for murdering Kurapika's entire clan just so they could sell their eyes. They wiped out the entire York New auction, which was stuffed to the gills with mafiosos with guns and hunters, and managed to steal every item that was being sold. And even now in the manga, they're on their way to the Dark Continent in order to go mess things up over there. To me, they are the most prolific group of bad guys in anime ever, and their story's not even done yet. But yours and my story is just now starting. We've been dropped into the Hunter x Hunterverse with an average to above average set of skills. So how are we gonna kill the Phantom Troupe? Well, we're gonna do this video just like we did the soloing the Akatsuki video. We're gonna start with the weakest member of the Phantom Troupe and work our way up. And since I've already ranked and explained every member of the Phantom Troupe, which I do need to do again because I rewatched that video and oh my god, has the quality gone up. I'll be going in the order of the Phantom Troupe members I listed in that video. And obviously we're just talking about combat ability here. Some of the people at the bottom are some of the most useful people in the Phantom Troupe, but their combat ability isn't that high. So with no further ado, let's get to the weakest member of the Phantom Troupe, Kortopi. I've already mentioned the York New Auction, and without Kortopi, that York New Auction heist simply never would have happened. Kortopi has an ability called Gallery Fake. Essentially anything he is touching with his left hand, he can create with his right. The only exceptions being he can't recreate living beings. He can make a body, but that body will just be a corpse. And not to mention, anything he creates with his ability Gallery Fake becomes his N. And for those of you who haven't watched my Nen video, is essentially an aura that you can create that allows you to track anything that touches it. Let's say I gallery fake this water bottle and you take the fake. I will at all times, if I'm touching the original of this bottle, be able to track where this fake bottle has gone. Think of it a bit like a GPS. Or if anybody touches this bottle, I will instantly sense it. Which is why when Kortopi made 50 gallery fakes of all of the Phantom Troupe's hideouts, if Killua touched any of those buildings, Kortopi would have known immediately. But unfortunately for Kortopi, this is kind of where his abilities end. So from a practicality point, that is to fight him, basically all you need to do is avoid his N. If you can avoid Kortopi's N, aka his gallery fakes, he won't know you're coming. And once you get up on Kortopi, he has next to no fighting ability. I mean, don't get it twisted, he's still powerful, but any enhancer or really anybody of any Nen affinity whatsoever worth their salts would be able to beat him in a fight. So as long as you avoid his N and don't trigger off the fact that you're coming to fight him, you should be able to decapitate him just like Hisoka. That was easy, don't get used to it, because the next entry on our list is Kaluto. Kaluto is one of Killua's little siblings, and they are the second weakest member of the Phantom Troupe, and that is saying something because the second weakest member of the Phantom Troupe, being a Zoldyck, is a bad sign for us. Kaluto is actually a better assassin in terms of sneakiness than Killua. Kaluto was able to mask their presence from Phantom Troupe members. In the Chimera Ant invasion arc, when the Phantom Troupe is invading the hideout of the Chimera Ants, Kaluto is able to use Zetsu and suppress their aura from the other Phantom Troupe members so they can follow them. On top of that, Kaluto can use Rhythm Echo. You know that ability where you walk at a certain pace and it leaves physical after images all around you in a circle? And Kaluto also has an ability called Dance of the Serpent's Bite. Essentially, Kaluto is able to use paper scraps, thousands of them, and whirl them in a tornado of shape. And this tornado of paper gives you 1,000 paper cuts that eventually rip you to pieces. And while this is an incredibly powerful technique against those who aren't practiced in Nen, if you are practicing Nen, it's really not that big of a deal. See, in order to beat Kaluto, you would just have to be an enhancer. Obviously, with a sneakily trained assassin and a Zoldyck, finding them is going to be a problem. However, once Kaluto either springs the attack on you or just through sheer circumstance you happen to find them, the battle is relatively straightforward. Kaluto doesn't fight like the other Zoldycks, that being Zeno, Silva, and Killua. Primarily use either aura balls or their fists. Kaluto uses paper. So, as an enhancer, you want to get up close and personal against Kaluto. And in order to survive the Dance of the Serpent's Bite, you have to enforce your Ken. You see, Ken is the high-level version of Ten. By essentially combining Ten and Ren, you get Ken. Ten is when you coat your body in aura. Well, more specifically, you stop the aura leak from the top of your head and you flow it around your body. Ren is increasing your aura. So by combining Ren and Ten, you can increase how much aura flows around you defensively. And by using Ken, you should be able to shrug off the majority of the paper being used in the Dance of the Serpent's Bite. And then, you know, Kortopi. For our next entry on the list, you're also once again gonna want to be an enhancer, because our next entry on the list is Pakunoda. See, Pakunoda, just like Kaluto and Kortopi, is a support type to the Phantom Troupe. She has an ability called Psychometry. Essentially, if she touches you, she can read your memories. And then she can download those memories from you, load them into what she calls a memory bomb, put that memory bomb in a bullet, and shoot a Nen bullet into her teammates' heads to give them those memories. She can even go so far as to take a memory from you, load it into a memory bomb, and shoot you with that memory so you forget the memory. However, those are the only abilities we've ever seen her use. So basically, all we can take from this ability is that she's an incredible shot. Because Kurapika put a chain around her heart that said if she ever divulged information about him to any of the Phantom Troupe members, she would die. And as that chain was destroying her heart, she was able to shoot memory bombs into 4 Phantom Troupe's minds. I think it was 4. I don't remember. So essentially, she's the fastest gun in the West. However, when the lights turned off in the hotel after the Phantom Troupe had re-caught Killua and Gon, she was speed blitzed by both Killua and Gon. And Killua was able to break her arm, and Gon was able to mess her face up pretty good, which implies her speed and durability aren't that great. The reason you want to be an enhancer in this situation is in order to enhance your speed and your defense. Honestly, her stealing your memories isn't that big of a deal. Unless, of course, she steals the memory as to why you want to fight her, loads it into a memory bomb, and shoots you. But the chances of her pulling this off are very slim. And since her Nen bullets have no offensive capabilities outside of that, she would just have to use regular bullets. And any enhancer worth their salt, and I mean genuinely any enhancer, can block bullets. In fact, most non-enhancers can block bullets. So you just have to enhance her Ken to block the bullets, use your speed to get up on her, and then expose that low durability. However, being an enhancer is not going to help you in this next fight, because in this next fight we have Shizuku, the baddest woman in Hunter x Hunter, bar none. That white underwear scene. Shizuku, like all the other entries on this list thus far, is a support type, and her ability is called Blinky. Essentially, Shizuku is a conjurer who's able to conjure a vacuum that can suck up all inanimate objects limitlessly. This makes her instrumental in cleanups, like in the York New Auction when she had to suck up all the dead bodies, blood, chairs, everything after they massacred the entire auction hall. But there's some things that Blinky can't suck up, and those are Nen-generated objects and living things. The living things kind of has an asterisk next to it, because let's say hypothetically you have a cut on you. Blinky can kind of use Samehada's ability to constantly drag life force out of you and suck the blood out of you. Just like how if Samehada cuts you, it constantly feeds on your chakra. So in order to beat Shizuku, you don't want to be an enhancer, because if she cuts you with Blinky, well, then she can suck all your blood out of you. On top of that, she is confirmed to be stronger physically than Gon in the York New arc. Gon beats her in an arm wrestling competition, but she uses her less dominant hand. So in order to beat Shizuku, you're going to want to be one of 2 possibilities, either a conjurer or an emitter. You're gonna want to be a conjurer because remember, there's one thing Blinky can't suck up: Nen conjured items. If you just have a regular sword and you try to attack Shizuku with it, Blinky can just suck it out of your hands. However, if that sword is made of Nen, Blinky can't do anything against it. This would apply to Kurapika's chains or basically anything else. This would allow you to have a hand-to-hand combat battle with Shizuku. Or you could be an emitter. Think Franklin's Nen bullets. Well, obviously Franklin's Nen bullets are stronger than anything we're gonna have. Still, as an emitter, you could emit lethal aura at Shizuku and Blinky wouldn't be able to suck it up. And ideally, you could keep your distance from her so she could never get a cut on you. But do you truly want to win? Wouldn't it be nice to be killed by Shizuku? No, just me. You know who I don't want to be killed by? Our next entry on the list: Scharnark. Scharnark is our first kind of attack type on the Phantom Troupe. While his role is usually as the analytical one and he usually supports from the background, he still has attack type moves. Scharnark has a Nen-generated cell phone and antennae, and if he places these antennae in a person, he can then control them with a Nen-conjured cell phone. So if he puts his antennae in a mafioso with an AK, he can then spray that AK at all his mafioso friends. And the same would go for us. If Scharnark was able to get an antennae in us, he could control us and just have us. But even if hypothetically Scharnark doesn't want to put an antennae in us for some reason, he can put an antennae in himself and set himself on autopilot mode. And autopilot mode enhances all of his abilities and essentially makes him super strong and fast. The trade-off being, after he uses autopilot mode, he has to rest for a couple of days. There's one weakness to Scharnark's ability, and it's technically just other manipulators. You see, let's say Scharnark is trying to put an antennae in this water bottle. This water bottle is going to be my teaching aid all of today. But let's say this water bottle already has an antennae from somebody else or is being manipulated by somebody else. Then Scharnark's antennae won't do anything. Scharnark's manipulation ability doesn't take priority over other people's manipulation ability. And it could stand to reason that this would even work for himself. Essentially, in order to beat Scharnark, you have to out-manipulate him. If you're able to fight him in a one-on-one situation away from other people where he can't put antennae in the people around him and control him, then your play is to get a manipulation Nen ability onto him before he can go into autopilot mode. Because if hypothetically you are able to accomplish this, he may not even be able to activate autopilot mode. Obviously, Scharnark is very strong, fast, and smart, so pulling this off is not going to be easy, but your best case scenario is fighting him somewhere away from other people and blitzing him with a manipulation Nen ability. And then you can string him up like Hisoka. However, blitzing isn't going to be an option in our next person, Nobunaga. See, Nobunaga is a true combat type in the Phantom Troupe. He's the weakest combat type in the Phantom Troupe, but still a combat type. He has no support abilities whatsoever. And Nobunaga, like every other member of the Phantom Troupe, is incredibly fast and strong. Nobunaga was 9th in the arm wrestling competition. Nobunaga really only has one ability, and that's Iaido. Essentially, Nobunaga only uses the ancient sword form of Iai Jutsu, which is the act of unsheathing your sword, striking, wiping the blood off your sword, and resheathing. Think thunder breathing from Demon Slayer. However, his Iaido technically only works within his N, and we explained N when we talked about Kortopi, but essentially his works a bit different than Kortopi's. Essentially, Nobunaga can make a 4-meter bubble all around him, which means in 360 degrees there is a 4-meter bubble away from Nobunaga. And anything, and I mean anything, that enters this bubble, he can slash almost instantaneously, which means that trying to run up on him is a terrible idea. You'd probably have to be the speed of Godspeed Killua, and even that may not be fast enough to speed blitz his sword. So how do you kill a man you technically can't touch? Pretty easily, actually. Nobody said you have to go into the bubble. In order to beat Nobunaga, you either have to be a transmuter, a conjurer, or an emitter. That's literally it. Let's start with a mission. Let's once again use Franklin's Nen bullets as an example. Once again, I'll reiterate, we will have nothing as strong as Franklin's Nen bullets, but I could just sit 10 meters away and fire admitted Nen from my fingertips at him. And sure, his sword is fast, but is it going to be fast enough to block a hail of bullets? Also, while you're using N, it's technically very difficult to maintain Ken, which means that while he's activated his Nen, basically his only defense is his sword. So anything he doesn't stop admission-wise is gonna tear through him. You could also be a transmuter. You could transmute your aura into something deadly, like rocks or electricity. And once again, we won't be on Killua's level, but if we can transmute electricity 5 meters, we'll just be able to shock him to death. Or finally, you could be a conjurer. You could just conjure up a bunch of kunai and fire them at him or something. As long as you don't go in the 4-meter bubble, you're pretty much safe. Also, technically, we don't know if the bubble goes under the ground he's sitting on, so you probably could just come from under him as well. You can't really slash down. After Nobunaga, we have another support type, Mochi. See, Mochi is not gonna be easy. Pretty much from here on out, it's not easy. Mochi is pretty much the most well-versed Nen user we've seen in all of Hunter x Hunter. She can use Hatsu, En, Ren, Gyo, basically everything. Not to mention she can literally fix severed limbs in like 5 seconds. She was the only person fast enough to react to Uguvin getting yanked up by Kurapika, being able to throw a Nen needle onto him before anybody else could even react. Her Nen needles can hypothetically stretch around the entire earth. She was able to sense both Gon and Killua while they were using Zetsu, something that Hisoka wasn't even able to do. How do you beat Mochi? That's a great question. The answer is enhance. Essentially, Mochi's biggest thing is her Nen needles and her Nen threads. So you're really gonna want to be able to see those. So obviously the use of Gyo on your eyes, allowing you to see Nen needles and Nen threads, is very important. Also, Mochi placed 6th in the arm wrestling competition, so she's very strong. So you're really also gonna have to enhance your Ken, because an unguarded strike from Mochi will cripple you. However, as somebody who's attacking with threads in needles, medium range, aka 10 to 20 meters away from her opponents, is where she likes to fight. So you're gonna have to close the distance on her by dodging her Nen needles in threads using Gyo, and then switch to Ken and enhancing your speed to get in a close-in fist fight. Listen, I'm not saying we're gonna win all these fights. I'm just saying this is how you would hypothetically be able to. What's ironic is the next person on the list is technically stronger than Mochi, but like I feel better about our strategy and our chances of winning, because our next entry on the list is Bona Linov. You see, Bona Linov is probably the least talked about and least explained character in the entirety of the Phantom Troupe, mostly because he's creepy and gets very little screen time. But Bona Linov is a conjurer, and he has 2 separate conjuration abilities, Prologue and Jupiter. Both of these conjuration abilities are tied to the holes in his body. You see, Bona Linov hails from a tribe where all the men have holes drilled out of their body. Wherever you don't have vital organs, you get a hole. And these holes, as you move, whistle. Well, assuming you've uncovered them. This is why Bona Linov is always covered with bandages, because as he unwraps more of these holes, the dances he does to make these holes whistle conjures more powerful abilities. So let's talk about those abilities. Prologue essentially just gives him a set of armor and a spear. I don't get why he has to do a dance in order to get this and why he couldn't just bring it, but conjuration abilities, man. The second ability is significantly more important, and it is called Jupiter. Essentially, if Bona Linov can accomplish a dance with all of his current holes exposed, he can use an ability called Jupiter. And essentially, this conjures the entire planet of Jupiter, not the entire planet of Jupiter, it's a much smaller version, but it follows you until you die. But there's a couple of conditions for Jupiter to get pulled off. 1, obviously Bona Linov has to take off literally all of his bandages. 2, he has to do a long and relatively convoluted dance in order to get this conjuration ability to work. And 3, technically you have to hear the ability. Essentially, if he completes the dance while you are still within earshot, the conjuration ability will follow you. And that's the biggest weakness. Obviously, running isn't always an option, and it doesn't have to be when you're fighting Bona Linov. It's never explicitly stated whether or not just being within earshot range or hearing the song is what makes Jupiter follow you. So it's not insane to reason that you have to hear it for Jupiter to follow you. So you could really do one of two things. You could do what Rengoku does in his fight against the flute demon and pop both of your eardrums with a hard slap, making you temporarily deaf, or you could just plug your ears. And as long as you don't hear the dance, it's a possibility Jupiter will just not follow you. But even if I'm wrong in that assumption, and there's a possibility that I am, you just gotta speed blitz him. You can either be an enhancer or a manipulator to beat Bona Linov. You can enhance your speed and power to make sure he has no time to dance or take his bandages off, or you can be a manipulator and get a manipulation nen ability on him that just makes him stop the dance or put his bandages back on. The fact that he has so many self-imposed restrictions to his conjuration ability makes Jupiter incredibly strong, but pulling it off is also very difficult. So he's actually technically not that hard of an out. That all changes for our next entry on the list though, Franklin. You see, Franklin is an emitter, essentially by imposing the self-imposed restriction of cutting off his own fingertips because it's easier to emit nen from the tips of your fingers. The nen bullets he fires from now his new fingertips are much stronger. On top of this, it's heavily implied that Franklin has the highest amount of aura out of any member of the Phantom Troupe. Oh, and he's the 4th physically strongest. And you're saying,
well, they're only bullets, so Ken should be able to stop him, right?
no? Well, maybe. So here's the thing. We've seen Franklin's nen bullets kill hunters. Now, were these hunters enhancers? No. But as hunters, they should have at least mastered 10, which would imply that they had an aura shrouding around them. Which means that if your aura shrouding isn't high Ken level, that more than likely you will get ripped apart by these bullets. On top of this, most Ken or 10 aura shrouds can only block a certain amount of bullets. And Franklin has the highest amount of aura out of anybody on the Phantom Troupe, which means he can probably fire his finger guns longer than you can block them. Which means that our only real choice in order to beat Franklin is to be a conjurer or a transmuter. Since we're probably not going to be able to block Franklin's nen bullets with either Ken or 10, we would have to conjure something that could. Obviously, you can't conjure the world's strongest shield or a sword that cuts anything. However, you can conjure things that have self-imposed restrictions. And the more self-imposed restrictions something has, the stronger it is against specific things. So you could hypothetically conjure a shield with the self-imposed restriction that it's only to be used against admission type nen attacks. Therefore, any physical attack, enhanced attack, anything that is not admitted nen will go directly through the shield or break it. With these kinds of self-imposed restrictions, hypothetically, the shield should be strong enough to block Franklin's nen bullets. You could also conjure a shield and say it's only to be used against Franklin's nen bullets, and if you use it against anybody else, it will kill you, kind of like how Kurapika does. And this should allow you to block Franklin's nen bullets. However, is blocking Franklin's nen bullets gonna be enough? Now, probably not, because Franklin is an emitter, which means he can use enhancement techniques at 80% efficiency. And him being the 4th strongest person on the Phantom Troupe points to the fact that he knows how to use those enhancement techniques. However, he is slow and obviously heavily relies on the nen bullets. So if you can block enough nen bullets to get close to or even behind Franklin, you could conjure an item like a sword and try to attack him. Only problem is, as a conjurer, you are only 60% effective in enhancement techniques, which means technically in an enhancement fight, he is stronger than you, which is why you would probably want to use transmutation techniques to either change your aura into something that will make you either physically faster or physically stronger or just physically harder. And hopefully with the combination of being able to shut down his nen bullets and a transmuted aura that makes you strong enough to go fist to fist with him, you win. Once again, man, the later half of this list is gonna be tough. But if you guys thought 4th on the list of physical strength was gonna be hard for us to beat, well, what about 2nd? Because up next we have Finks. Finks is an enhancer in every sense of the word. He has superhuman strength and speed. In fact, we've seen him quite literally just straight line through groups of people and snap every single neck on his way through. But outside of just being a very competent enhancer, he also has an enhancement technique. Essentially, Finks can rotate his arm, and every single time he rotates his arm, more aura is loaded up into his fist. It's a bit like Gon's Jaja-ken. Well, his Jaja-ken rock. However, instead of standing like this in loading up aura into his fist like Gon does, Finks just has to rotate his arm. Finks was able to obliterate a Chimera Ant Lieutenant with 15 cranks of his arm, but he said only half the cranks would have been necessary. So 7 to 8 cranks is enough to obliterate a Lieutenant Chimera Ant. And Lieutenant Chimera Ant is probably where we highball our strength to. So, not great. However, Finks is an enhancer, and we've never seen him use anything but enhancement techniques, which means more than likely he's only trained in enhancement, which means we just need to keep him away from us. As long as he's not physically snapping our necks or punching us with a loaded up punch, we should be good, which is why in order to beat Finks, you want to be an emitter, or even possibly a manipulator. By having a constant barrage of emitted Nen for Finks to try and dodge or even try to hit Finks with, we can keep him at a distance. As an enhancer though, he is technically a very balanced offensive and defensive person. However, when he cranks his arm, he puts all of his aura into his fist. This is technically Ryu, the use of Gyo while in Ken. Essentially, while he cranks up his arm, Finks is taking Ken away from the rest of his body and putting it in his fist, which means the more cranks that he does, the less defensive aura he has. So if he's cranking his arm and we're keeping him at a distance, hypothetically, we could fatally shoot him with admitted Nen, because his aura would be in his arm and not defending him. This also works for manipulators. If you think Scharnark's ability Black Voice or Illumi's Needle People, essentially we could manipulate crowds of people to attack him and then try and sneak in behind him to manipulate him. Enhancers are actually very susceptible to manipulators because of how straightforward they are. They're not overly analytical. We would send waves of people at him and he would just assume he had to kill all of them to get through to us. He wouldn't assume there was a greater plan. And if we manipulate him, we can just have him crank up his arm and punch his block off. You know what? I was saying this is gonna be hard, but I actually feel kind of confident in that idea. I feel significantly less confident in this idea though, because if you thought second on the physical strength list wasn't enough, well, how about first? That's right. We have Ugavin, quite literally the strongest enhancer in the entire show outside of Gon. Ugavin has the highest durability of anybody we've ever seen in this show, outside of Meruem, obviously. He has tanked sniper bullets, bazookas, caught bullets in his teeth. He has survived deadly leeches being put into his body, a neurotoxin being put into his body by Rabid Dog. He bit a man's face off and used the skull bits to kill another man, and he yelled so loud he knocked a man out. Not to mention his healing factor basically healed him from Rabid Dog's bite immediately, and his strongest ability, his right straight punch, also known as Big Bang Impact, is as strong as a small missile. So how do you kill a man who essentially cannot be killed? Well, just like any enhancers, he too is also incredibly straightforward, which means that he is very rarely looking for the greater scheme, which is how he fell into Kurapika's trap of chain jail. So we would also want to conjure something that would put somebody into a state of Zetsu. Only problem is, in order to be a conjurer who can make something strong enough to hold down Ugavin even in a state of Zetsu, we're probably gonna have to be a full-blown conjurer. We're not like Kurapika, who can use all abilities at 100% when his eyes are red. It's a problem because in order to get Ugavin into a situation where he's gonna fall into our trap of putting him in Zetsu, we're probably gonna have to fight him for a little bit, which means we can only use enhancement techniques at 60%, and he can use them at 100, and a very high 100, mind you. So we kind of just had to like surprise him, punch him, scamper away to a hole that we've dug that's filled with either like Nen needles and Nen thread or Nen chains that once he falls into, wrap him up, and then boom, Zetsu. And then once he's in that state of Zetsu, we can probably shoot him to death with like a really big gun, because I have a feeling that even in a state of Zetsu, his body can reflect most small weapons. Or, and stick with me here, we could just use the Dictator's Rose. It killed Meruem, and it doesn't necessarily have to be on our heart. We could just hold him up for a little bit, toss it in, and run away as fast as we could. Or, you know, we could use it on our heart and also explode him once he kills us. It's not like a great win, but he's still dead. Speaking of fights we have low chances of winning, our next up is Illumi. Problem with the Phantom Troupe that doesn't exist with the Akatsuki is that it is so top heavy. Like, people you legitimately have to be worried about in the Akatsuki are just Nagato, Obito, Itachi, Kisame, Kakuzo. Okay, that's half of them. Never mind. Whatever. Illumi. Illumi was able to kill 20 hunters before they were even able to ask for help. Like, not before they were able to fight back. Illumi was able to kill 20 hunters before they even realized what was going on. He can control massive armies of people using his needle people ability, where essentially he can place one needle in a person's skull and direct them to do a simple task, like chase me. And since he has many needles, he can do this with 20 or 30 people, directing a sort of zombie army at whoever he wants to. Or if he wants to use more than one needle, he can use his ability called corpse control, where essentially he has to kill somebody and then he puts a bunch of needles in them, but then he can use this person at a high level. That person can drive, speak, do any high level cognitive function. He is a manipulator through and through. However, needle people and corpse control also have the same weakness as Scharnark. If hypothetically the person that they're trying to put under their manipulation is already being manipulated by somebody else, they can't manipulate them anymore. So in order to beat Illumi in a fight, what do we have to do? Out-manipulate the best manipulator in the show. Small task. But basically, the best way to beat Illumi is to fight him in an area where no one else is. Illumi's strength comes from his ability to use the people around him as weapons. However, in a 1v1 fight with nobody around, for him to use as a weapon, he's gonna want to use you as the weapon. And what's terrifying is quite literally all he needs to do is get one needle in you and then you are a needle person. So there's a couple of strategies here. One is to be a manipulator and use a manipulation technique on yourself already. Something like Scharnark's autopilot. Since you are already being manipulated, Illumi won't be able to manipulate you. And the boost you get from using a manipulation technique on yourself, like Scharnark's autopilot, will give you a boost in the fight against Illumi. Because remember, he still is Zoldyck. Hisoka rated him a 95 out of 100 in terms of strength, which is higher than most of the Zodiacs. So even if he can't manipulate you, beating him in a one-on-one battle is still not going to be fun. The other strategy is to be a straight-up enhancer, in hope by enforcing your Ken so much that the needles actually can't penetrate your aura level and hit your brain, and then use those enhancement techniques to increase your speed and power and beat him in a one-on-one fist fight. Worst comes to worst, he hits you with the needle and you become a needle person. Hey, some people survive it, but you know what some people don't survive? Meeting Phaeton, and he's our next entry on the list. Phaeton is the fastest member of the Phantom Troupe. Kaluto, a Zoldyck member capable of using Rhythm Echo, is barely able to keep up with his movements with their eyes. He is technically a conjurer, an emitter, and a transmuter, all because of his ability,
Pain Packer.
which requires that he conjures a suit that transmutes pain into Nen, and that admits that Nen in the form of a sun. Not like a sun, something you make, a sun, the thing that heats the planet. And the more pain, I'm putting pain in quotation marks here, and I'll explain that in a second, that gets doled out to the pain packer, the hotter and the bigger the sun gets. And you're probably thinking, well, the sun's right above his head, that probably hurts him. But within the pain packer suit, he is immune to the heat of the sun he creates, and he also has enough oxygen to survive until the sun is thrown. The reason I put pain in quotation marks is because it's not actually pain that he's transmuting into Nen. Essentially, any Nen that the pain packer is struck with, Phaeton is able to transmute into his own Nen. But Nen packer doesn't sound as cool. And this is kind of the one weakness of the pain packer. It needs to be struck with Nen in order to make a sun, which means that if Phaeton uses the pain packer, as long as you do not strike him with a Nen attack, technically a sun will not be made. So if he pulls out the pain packer, you just have to use Ryu. But in the reverse way that Gon or Finks uses. You have to put Ryu into your arms, your biceps, your shoulder, your hips in order to punch him in Pain Packer, but you have to keep all of the Nen out of your fists. Essentially, you need to keep Zetsu on your fists and only your fists, or whatever is going to come in contact with the Pain Packer. That way you can dole out physical damage to Phaeton without having to worry about creating a sun. Now, this is just a theory, by the way, on how the Pain Packer works. Technically, it is stated that any injuries or pain that he takes throughout the duration of the battle, he can transmute into aura. That just doesn't really make sense to me within the confines of Nen. Unless, of course, you looked at it as a self-imposed restriction that states he can have access to more of his Nen the more injured he is, in which case it would actually make sense. Okay, take the Pain Packer theory with a grain of salt. But even getting Phaeton to use the Pain Packer would imply we pushed him into a corner, which we most likely would not be able to do. Ideally, the best way to beat Phaeton in a fight is to either be a transmuter or an enhancer. Since Phaeton is the fastest member of the Phantom Troupe, we are almost definitely not going to be faster than him, which means that he's going to hit us, and probably a lot, which means we have to boost our defense, our Ken, which is where enhancement techniques come in. However, since we are also trying to beat him in a fight, though just defending is not going to be enough. We are also more than likely going to have to use transmutation techniques, and this will be done in order to slow him down. If we could transmute our aura into something sticky in order to slow him down, that would be ideal. Think bungee gum, but mostly just the gum bit. By having our Ken Shroud be large and therefore have our defense be heightened, and also transmuting that Ken Shroud into something sticky, we would be able to slow him down. And then ideally you kill him before he activates Pain Packer, because any damage you do to him before he activates Pain Packer also leads into the sun. And the second a sun gets built, well, GG's. But while we're talking about transmuters, we might as well talk about the second strongest one in the entirety of the show. Or actually, probably the first. I don't know, I guess it depends on where you highball Killua to. Regardless, we're talking about Hisoka. And whether or not you consider Hisoka a true member of the Phantom Troupe doesn't really matter to the context of this video. Hisoka is the third strongest physically of all of the Phantom Troupe members. And it's implied that he just gave up because he got sick of doing arm wrestles. So he could be the second or maybe even the first. He is a transmuter with the ability to transmute his Nen into bungee gum, which, and you're not gonna believe this, has the properties of both rubber and gum. But even beyond the joke, bungee gum is incredibly OP. It can be used to slow people down, like Phaeton. It can be used to stop projectiles, like the coins that Killua's butler shot at him. Hell, man, it was even used to stop Razor's volleyball. Hisoka's even gone so far as to coat his lungs and his heart with it, so when he dies, it would restrict using postmortem Nen and bring him back to life. On top of that, he's able to use a conjuration ability called Texture Surprise that allows him to change his aura into 1,000 different surfaces. So he could just make a ghillie suit and pop out of nowhere. So how do you beat a man that Chrollo had to prep to kill? And even possibly cheat, by the way. Well, there's really only one option. We know that bungee gum has both the properties of rubber and gum. And what is one thing that both rubber and gum don't like? The cold. Now, I'm not saying fight Hisoka in a walk-in fridge. No, I'm saying in order to beat Hisoka, you yourself also have to be a transmuter. But your transmutation type has to be the counter of rubber and gum. If you could transmute your aura into something cold, like ice, then you actually stand a fighting chance against Hisoka. By stiffening the rubber and getting rid of the stickiness of gum by using cold temperatures, you essentially take Hisoka's trump card away from him. Of course, he still has Texture Surprise, but that's more used for deceit than anything. And as a transmuter, both you and him can use enhancement techniques at 80%. So by taking his trump card in bungee gum away from him and still being able to transmute your aura into something cold like ice, you actually have a leg up on him in terms of transmutation. And your enhancement techniques being equal gives you a fighting chance in terms of a one-on-one battle. Obviously, there's a possibility he's the strongest physically out of all of the Phantom Troupe members, but in terms of transmutation, you would have a leg up. And that is quite literally your best fighting chance. And even if you kill him, he's like Orochimaru. He always comes back. The victory will not last long. Though hypothetically, if he was too cold to use bungee gum on both his lungs and his heart to restart them, then maybe you would win. But it's a big maybe. Unfortunately, there's no maybes with our next and final entry on the list, Chrollo. You lose. I'm sorry. I know you want me to tell you how you could win, but you lose. This man killed Hisoka. He fought Zeno and Silva Zoldyck without trying to kill them and fought them to a stalemate. In order to kill him, Silva was about to have to kill Zeno. He has a specialist ability that allows him to take the Nen abilities of others. And he has so many Nen abilities, he has an entire filled book with it. He has Scharnark's Black Voice that allows him to control people around him. He has Convert Hands that allows him to switch appearances with the person he's touching. He has Sun and Moon that allows him to place explosives anywhere he wants and detonate them whenever he wants. He has an ability called Indoor Fish that essentially summons a dragon, and as long as you're indoors, it can take chunks out of you, and as long as it's still summoned, you stay alive, even if it's taken half of your brain. He can teleport, he can tell the future, not to mention he also has the Fun Cloth, which can shrink anything down to a pocket size. There is literally one way to beat him in a fight. You make a Nen ability, an incredibly powerful and cool looking Nen ability. A Nen ability Chrollo wants very badly. Doesn't even matter what it is. All that matters is that Chrollo wants it. You use it in front of Chrollo to get him to want it. But here's the thing about this incredibly powerful and incredibly cool Nen ability. If you use it twice, it kills you. So this Nen ability that you've created, you can use once in front of Chrollo to drum up his interest. Then you let him steal the ability. You act like you don't know what's going on. You allow him to make physical contact with you. You allow him to ask you questions about it, and then he steals your Nen ability. And here's the thing about the Nen abilities that Chrollo steals. If the person he steals the Nen ability from dies, that Nen ability disappears. So he technically doesn't want to kill the people he stole Nen abilities from. So in that regard, we're safe chief as well. So now that Crollo has stolen our incredibly cool but secretly very dangerous Nen ability, he goes on to fight powerful, important people like Hisoka. And he uses the technique once and it's super effective, and Hisoka's backed into a corner. And as he goes to use the technique a second time, heart explodes. And just like that, the long game is paid off, baby. That is literally the only way to kill Crollo. Or Dictator's Rose. But that's the answer for basically any entry on this list, so it's kind of boring. I wasn't gonna use it. And that's it, the definitive way that you'll still most likely die to every single member of the Phantom Troupe. If you guys liked today's video about Hunter x Hunter, guys, please tell me in the comments below. I love covering it so much. And while you guys are down there in the comments, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Listen, I'm not saying that I think the only person we could confidently kill was Corta P, but definitely got some doubts.